Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now, about a year or so ago, AMD launched the Ryzen 5 3500X. Now, you may never have heard of this CPU, and that's because it was released exclusively to China. However, since then, it's become available here in the UK and I'm sure other places as well, and from what I've found, it seems to be roughly £10 cheaper than the 3600, so I couldn't help but wonder just how much of a difference there is between the two chips and whether or not you should buy the 3500X to save a little bit of money. So let's talk specs first of all. I've wrote everything down here because although I've been testing it all day, I'm prone to forget these little details. So the 3500X shares the same core count. It's a 6-core CPU. It's clocked at 3.6 GHz, though it does have a slightly lower boost clock speed than the 3600 at 4.1 GHz as opposed to 4.2. There's also the small matter, or rather large matter, of the thread count. The 3500X lacks SMT or simultaneous multi-threading, so it only has 6 threads compared to its bigger brother. And I couldn't help but wonder just how much of a difference this would make in games when both of them are paired with a not modest, not really affordable, not really available graphics card. I'm using the RTX 2060 today for my comparisons. The reason being is that it got re-released this year. I was going to use the 3070 and I thought, you know, you can't find a 3070, and if you can, they're over £1,000 here in the UK. So I just thought, why not use a 2060? It's still a decent card. You know, we may not see as much of a difference between the two chips when using this GPU at 1080p, but I think it represents something that a lot of people, I want to say, should be able to find. The GPU market's a mess. I'm using a 2060 because I thought it made more sense than a 3070 or a 3080, for example. As simple as that. It's as simple as that. The market's all over the place, and the 2060 is probably your best hope, or one of your better hopes of finding a card right now, but I don't want to go on a GPU availability rant. Anyway, the 3500X then and the 3600, is it worth saving that little bit of money and going for the 3500X now that it's more widely available, or should you just try and find a 3600? Now, of course, availability again depends on where you live, and so does pricing. Here in the UK, there's about £10 between these two chips at a lot of places, sometimes more, sometimes a little bit less, but I have some gaming results for you now. A quick word on productivity though. If you are using, or you do plan to use, either of these for productivity purposes, editing, rendering videos, anything CPU intensive in that regard, then the 3600 is simply going to be your best bet because of those 12 threads. There's no two ways about it. But when it comes to strictly gaming, well, let's talk about that. So the first game I tested today was Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. I was using the recommended settings set by the game when I first jumped into it. Now, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War runs very well on both of these chips with the RTX 2060. 101 FPS was the average with the 3600, followed by a 1% low of 53 and a 0.1% low of 47. The 3500X, however, came close on average with 99 FPS and a 1 and 0.1% low of 50 and 42 respectively, so there were a few more dips here and there, but overall the performance with both CPUs when paired with 3200 MHz DDR4 and an RTX 2060 isn't going to be that significant. Moving on, and we have Cyberpunk 2077 next, a pretty CPU intensive game. 75, 45 and 26 were the figures for the 3600, but the 3500X hit 69 FPS with a 1% low of 34 and a 0.1% low of 25. So the 1% low was quite a bit lower on this occasion with the 3500X, but the 0.1% low was around about the same, so not much of a difference as far as that was concerned. You are, however, going to notice a higher overall average frame rate with the 3600, and I feel in this case the extra money is definitely worth it because Cyberpunk is one of those games where the frame rate is going to fluctuate, especially in busier downtown areas, and it's nice to have a little more CPU power in your system to account for that. GTA 5, Again, wasn't much difference here, just like in Black Ops Cold War. There may be with a more powerful GPU, but here with the 2060, 128, 97 and 88 were the results with the 3600. The 3500X hit 126 with a 1% low of 97, pretty much identical to the 3600, and then a 0.1% low of 85, so there really wasn't much in it here. In Red Dead Redemption 2, the 1% low, as far as the 3500X was concerned, was quite a bit lower than it was with the 3600, and so was the 0.1% low. So as you make your way towards busier towns like Valentine, for example, this is where you're going to notice the difference between having those extra threads and not having them. SMT really does help out in the case of Red Dead. When you're wandering around the countryside though, the difference isn't going to be as significant. Finally, and a game that I really wasn't expecting to see that much of a difference in, was The Witcher 3. Making our way towards Novigrad and walking around the big city here was where we saw the most difference. It was pretty CPU intensive in this regard. You'll see the usage shoot up higher in places like Novigrad, and this is going to be the case with this 6-core, 6-threaded CPU in a lot of titles. The CPU usage, you may have noticed throughout today's tests, has generally been higher with the 3500X, but it was to be expected. The average was quite a bit lower here, so was the 1% low in fact, and the 0.1% low was significantly affected by the lack of SMT. This may have just been one small issue here. I did in fact notice the point in which this happened. It didn't happen with the 3600, so bear in mind there may be a few more stutters with the weaker chip. Overall then, for the difference in price, in a lot of instances, it's certainly worth going with the 3600, especially if you plan on using it for productivity or your games library is a little more CPU intensive. I know The Witcher 3 is a game that's still very popular today, and if you are going to be playing a lot of this, then you're going to be noticing a difference between the 3500X and the 3600. I think for the 3500X to be more appealing, aside from the obvious availability issues, well, it's going to need a lower price tag. £10 difference here in the UK isn't enough to make me think, oh yes, I'll go for that instead because it's cheaper. I'd like to see at least £50 or £60 difference, if I'm honest. If the 3500X retailed for about £100, £110 at the moment, when the 3600 is going for £170, £180, it may be a little more tempting, but it certainly still can keep up when paired with a 2060 in certain games, particularly those more GPU intensive ones. All that's left to say then is, well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. This has been the 3500X gaming test. If you enjoyed it, leave a like down below, leave a dislike if you didn't. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.